Imagine being a homeless guy in the state of California. For most of the year, you're untouchable. You can sleep completely naked right outside of an art gallery, and if the gallery owner sprays you with a hose to get you to move, he's the one who gets arrested. That's happened recently. The district attorney will issue statements about how unhoused folks have the right to sleep wherever they want, wearing or not wearing whatever clothes they want. On top of that, the state provides millions of free syringes to help facilitate your drug habit, complete with quote-unquote safe injection sites that function like open-air drug markets. Plus, the weather's always nice. So generally speaking, as a homeless person in the Golden State, you have it pretty good, all things considered. But every once in a while, on a dime, California's government completely changes its approach. It's quite a role reversal. Politicians suddenly become the schizophrenic ones themselves, and they decide without any warning that all the homeless encampments have to be dismantled. They hose down the sidewalks themselves. They clear the place out like it's Tiananmen Square. And they issue statements about the importance of orderly streets and ending the scourge of lewd behavior in public libraries. You might remember that this is what happened late last year when the leader of China's Communist Party, Xi Jinping, visited the Bay Area. Ahead of the visit, Gavin Newsom ordered a crackdown on homeless encampments and drug markets. And he admitted he was only doing it because Xi Jinping was in town. Quote, anytime you put on an event, by definition, you have people over at your house, you're going to clean up the house. That's what he said. Effectively, Gavin Newsom was admitting that California's decline is a choice. The only reason they have so many homeless people, more than any other state by far, is that they tolerate it. In an instant, Gavin Newsom can make it all go away. Now, somebody might have answered Newsom by pointing out that, you want to clean up your house for guests, but you also want to keep it orderly and clean for the people who actually live there every day. But Xi Jinping eventually left the Bay Area, so the homeless people filed back in, started doing meth and defecating on the sidewalks again, just like old times, as if they'd never been interrupted. And that continued until yesterday, when once again, out of the blue, Gavin Newsom decided to put an end to it. Watch.
Breaking news this morning, we're hearing from Governor Gavin Newsom after he issued an executive order that directs local authorities to begin dismantling homeless encampments. KTLA's Omar Lewis live now in Hollywood with those details. Omar, good morning.
Jessica, good morning. Yeah, that executive order from the governor is aimed at dismantling thousands of homeless encampments just like this one here on Hollywood Boulevard this morning. The move follows a landmark Supreme Court decision which gave local leaders greater authority to remove homeless encampments.
Okay, so you hear in that news report that the reason that California is suddenly able to clear all these encampments is that the Supreme Court recently allowed them to do it. That's a reference to the Grants Pass case, which was decided a few weeks ago. In its decision, the Supreme Court ruled that it is not cruel and unusual punishment to prevent homeless people from camping out on public property, even if there's no shelter they can go to. It's obviously not. Newsom himself made the same argument in a video posted to social media. He said that he's been doing everything he possibly can to clear out the homeless, and now that the Supreme Court has given him the green light, he can finally go forward with it. Watch.
I don't think there's anything more urgent and more frustrating than addressing the issue of encampments in the state of California. Over the course of the last number of years, the state has stepped up, where in the past we provided no support, no resources to cities and counties to clean up encampments like this. Today, we've invested now over $1 billion in encampment resolution grants, not only to clean up sites like this, but to address the underlying issue in the first place. One of the big issues, though, that has been an impediment was the courts. In the past, the courts have denied the ability for local government, including the state, to clean up many of these encampments. Today, I announced an executive order to move the process forward. We're done. It's time to move with urgency.
Now, before we go any further, it's important to give credit where it's due, to the extent that you can. Solely on the merits, Gavin Newsom's order is obviously the right thing to do. The homeless have no right to make our communities into unlivable garbage dumps. The idea that they have the right to behave this way and to destroy communities is insane. They have no right to do it. As unpopular as it is to say, for the most part, the homeless are not mere victims of circumstances. These are, not always, but very often, aggressive and dangerous vagrants who actively make our communities unsafe. And in many cases, again, not all, they are homeless because they have decided to live their entire lives revolve their entire lives around their drug habit. And that's all that matters to them. And they couldn't care less about you or your family or what they're doing to you. So there's been a huge excess of sympathy for these people, but not nearly enough anger at what they're doing to our cities and the people that are allowing them to do it. So it's a good idea for Newsom's administration to file a brief at the Supreme Court during the Grants Pass case on the side of the city against the homeless encampments. And it's good that Newsom is sticking with that position. Now, at the same time, what Newsom is doing is also disingenuous. And we know that because his excuse, blaming the courts for hamstringing him until now, doesn't really make any sense. First of all, he was able to clean out the homeless encampments just a few months ago for China's president. No court stopped that. Additionally, for well over a decade, Gavin Newsom has been vowing to end homelessness in California. And courts in California didn't say it was cruel and unusual punishment to evict homeless people from their encampments until 2018. So what was the excuse pre-2018? Newsom's going to need one because as far back as 2008, he was saying that he would end chronic homelessness in San Francisco by building more houses. He said that was the solution to chronic homelessness, not clearing encampments. And he said it again and again. Watch.
What we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
How are you going to solve homelessness? What are you going to do as a new mayor? And I say, well, what are you going to do?
Focus on a housing first model, direct access to housing.
Shelter solve sleep, housing with wraparound and support services solve homelessness. Homelessness absolutely can be solved.
Laid out a detailed homeless strategy. There's been no intentionality on homelessness in this state for decades. It's not been a focus.
I don't think we can solve homelessness. I know we can solve homelessness. We will reduce street homelessness quickly and humanely through emergency action.
The highest investment the state's ever made is $1 billion on homelessness. We are poised to pass a budget in the next few hours that will provide $12 billion of investment. I can literally quantify 58,000 people that we got off the streets last year, and none of you would believe it.
This state has not made progress in the last 2 decades as it relates to homelessness.
Why? We're not interested in funding failure. We're not interested in failing more efficiently when it comes to the issue of homelessness and the crisis on the street.
So Newsom said that shelters solve sleep repeatedly for several years. I've talked about this before on the show, but it bears repeating because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. People in shelters still need to sleep. Shelters do not solve sleep. But apparently Newsom thought it was a compelling catchphrase. Started saying it in 2008. He was saying it as late as 2014. It was the line that Newsom used to justify spending tens of billions of dollars to fix chronic homelessness. And his strategy didn't work, as this chart clearly demonstrates. Homelessness in California has only increased in the past decade. The courts in California didn't cause this. At least they didn't cause it on their own. It's a product of a few things, mainly the state's refusal to prosecute and imprison criminals, its encouragement of drug use, and the glut of NGOs and law firms that work full-time to keep these people on the street and destroying communities. It's true the Supreme Court's ruling makes it easier to clear homeless encampments, but that ruling is not why Newsom is suddenly reversing course. He's reversing course because Democrats are now realizing they have to pretend to care about the basic security and safety of American communities if they want to win in November. It's pretty telling that they only care about crime and homelessness during elections and if foreign dignitaries are visiting. I'm kind of reminded on a smaller scale of some of my teachers in public school growing up, the ones that were like really awful and incompetent and angry all the time and shouting, but they suddenly became chipper and on the ball and had great activities for us to do and were teaching us when it was, when it was the parent day to visit. So it's a similar phenomenon here. Last November, Newsom sprang into action because he got a call from Xi Jinping. Maybe this time he got a call from Kamala Harris. And that would make sense because right on cue, Harris is also acting more like a centrist Republican in some ways than the most liberal senator in Congress, which is what she really is. She's even disavowing rioters. The woman who raised bail money for BLM thugs is now claiming to be appalled by vandalism and political violence. After her silence on Wednesday that we talked about, Harris posted this statement on social media on Thursday, quote, "Yesterday at Union Station, we saw despicable acts by unpatriotic protesters and dangerous hate-fueled rhetoric. I condemn any individuals associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas. Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent and we must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. The flag is a symbol of our highest ideals as a nation and represents the promise of America." Now, obviously, everything she says there is true. But like Newsom, she's saying it for transparent and cynical reasons, which will immediately become null and void the moment the election is over. You'll notice that nowhere in her statement does Harris mention the police officer who was violently dragged on the ground at Union Station yesterday. She also doesn't demand any kind of accountability. She doesn't call for an FBI dragnet like the one that happened after January 6th, which she has compared to 9/11 in Pearl Harbor. And that's noticeable because in this case, Harris is effectively the sitting president. She has the authority to order the DOJ to create a sedition and conspiracy task force like the one the Biden administration oversaw after January 6th. Harris could ensure that every single one of the vandals and rioters yesterday is hauled to prison, just like the grandmothers from January 6th were. She could ensure consequences for the rioters who raised a foreign flag a half a mile from the nation's capital. That would ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. But she's not doing any of that because she understands that those rioters are her voters. They are her base. She can wag her finger at them, and that'll tick them off. There were a lot of leftists who are upset with that statement, but she's not going to actually do anything to them. We're seeing this kind of faux moderation all over the place. It's the same reason Democrats are pretending that Harris was never named the border czar. They know that she was put in charge of the border for the sole purpose of making sure it stayed open. The corporate press, including the entirety of left-wing media, reported on that at the time. But they know that open borders don't play well in the general election, so now they're pretending she had nothing to do with the border. Now, you'd think that if the left thought that their position was tenable in the election, they would play this differently. You know, Harris would come out and say, hell yeah, I was in charge of the border, and I opened it for everybody. America is an idea, remember? And everyone has a right to participate in this idea. Isn't it great? She's not saying that, though. Instead, she's disavowing the whole mess, and the media is helping her. Now, along the same lines, they're reacting with outrage that conservatives are calling Kamala Harris a DEI hire. They're claiming this is a right-wing conspiracy theory to make people afraid of the DEI boogeyman. But they know that Joe Biden explicitly limited his VP search to women, and they know that just a few months ago, Biden publicly called Harris a DEI hire himself. Watch.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country and starts at the top with the vice president.
So he said, I mean, it's always hard to understand what he says, but he says there, to me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion, DEI, are literally the core strengths of America. It starts at the top with the vice president. I mean, he said that she's the very embodiment of DEI. That's him talking. Now Democrats are pretending Joe Biden never said any of that. They're pretending they never demanded that Joe Biden pick a black woman during the summer of George Floyd. There are obvious signs of weakness here that Republicans can exploit. Democrats understand that their policies simply aren't popular among normal people. They understand that nobody wants rampant homelessness or DEI hiring or unchecked illegal immigration or rioters who wave terrorist flags while assaulting police officers. They understand that leftist policies actively make people's lives worse. They actively destroy the well-being of millions of people in ways that we don't have to ways that are so obvious that we don't have to twist ourselves into knots to explain it. Whereas on the other side, of course, the left will claim that conservative policies destroy American lives. But when you look around, you don't see, well, how is this destroying anything? So they have to really come up with abstract ways to say, oh, well, this is ruining your life in this way. But in the reverse, it's quite obvious. Leftist policies when it comes to homelessness, like if you live in a community run by a Democrat, if you live in a Democrat-run city, I don't have to tell you why their approach to homelessness is making your life worse. You just walk outside your house and you can see it. And that's why with just a few months to go until the election, Democrats are pretending to disavow all of those things. And they'll do this, they do this all the time before elections. Normally it works. This time, though, they're saddled with the single least authentic politician imaginable. Kamala Harris, of all people, is trying to convince Americans that she's tough on left-wing rioters and illegal immigration. She's using Gavin Newsom's stick with a fraction of his charisma. And the reason Democrats are panicking right now as they look at the polls is that they realize most people can see right through it. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.